And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Del Vecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry. Coming up on the show, did you know that April is Autism Awareness Month? And we're going to hear from a parent of 2 children with autism. We're going to be discussing parental challenges, the importance of early diagnosis, and why things are looking up for a prosperous integration into society. And on the second half of the show, are you having trouble finding a doctor? Well, perhaps you're having trouble with your existing doctor, but you're very hesitant to even change your existing doctor because you know how much the time and the waiting list is. Well, we want to hear from anyone that has dealt with this issue so we could share it with our listeners. And also on the second half, and on a much broader scale, caregivers not only have to deal with finding a doctor for their loved one, they must constantly navigate a healthcare system that's really stretched to the limits. And I'm going to be responding to calls and texts from caregivers that need advice to make their caregiving journey just a little bit easier. So that's all coming up on the second half of the show after the 4:30 news. Just a quick little mention about an upcoming presentation on downsizing and senior living trends. My wife Stephanie Cadu and I were invited by Selection West Island in Point Claire, who will be hosting this event. It's a free conference on Thursday, April 27th at 2 p.m. And seats are limited, so registration is required. And you can call or text me, actually, at 514-622-8074, and I'll get you registered. I'll repeat that one more time, 514-622-8074. And that's a presentation with the topic being downsizing and senior living trends. All right. Now, the odds are that you either have a direct family member affected by autism or you know someone that is dealing with a person on the autism spectrum. And we wanted to get the perspective of a parent to share her experience with us. Dr. Sazini Nzula is a mother of 2 children living with autism. She has 2 boys, one 16 years old and the other is 13 years old. Sazini is the author of a wonderful book called Beautiful Inside and Out, What You Ought to Know About Autism and How to Embrace the Unique Way Your Child is Flourishing. Sazini, welcome back to Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you coming in on a rainy day. You were scrambling to get in here in the studio. You made it, but thank you for coming in, and I always enjoy having you. April is Autism Awareness Month, as we mentioned, yes. And we thought it was just very appropriate to get the good word out there. And it seems like we're hearing more and more people on the autism spectrum. Are the stats and facts backing this up?
I think part of the reason, yes, we are hearing more about people with autism because it's part of the broader conversation we're hearing about diversity and inclusion. But yes, there are actually stats backing that up because in 2000, the rate was about 1 in 150. And by 2021, it was 1 in 66 individuals diagnosed with autism.
Oh my goodness, 1 in 66.
Yes.
And I guess you're exactly right. There in this new world of social media and diversity and inclusion, sure, there's probably more heard about autism. I was talking to someone the other day, back in the 60s and 70s, didn't even know about it. But factually, you're saying 1 to 150 ratio, now 1 to 66.
Yes.
Amazing. Now, why do you think the figures are going up?
It's one of the things really is because the definition of autism has broadened. Before autism were the people who because we talk about autism as being a spectrum. So way back when, the people who were called autism were the ones who were on the extreme end of the spectrum. But now we recognize that many, many people do have autism and they don't all manifest the same way. And the definition has changed, therefore the numbers are going up.
I see. All right. And probably not a bad thing as we want to get more and more awareness out there. So I'd love to hear about your own family's situation.
Well, I have 2 boys, like you mentioned. They are 13 and 16, and they were both diagnosed with autism when they were around 2 years old, which was early. We were very lucky.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about early diagnosis. And so, boy, Sazini, they grow up fast. They're 16 and 13 now. So both diagnosed at 2, so 14 years and 11 years old with the diagnosis. And so just speaking about that, when you found out that it was 2 years old when they were diagnosed, and just to give my own personal story, I have a special needs daughter. She's 25 now as well, not on the autism spectrum, but considered highly functioning, intellectually deficient is the official government term on it. And I'll never forget, it was around 2 or 3 years old as well. And I'll never forget that moment where, boy, I did not like that. It was in this time, it was a social worker that we were talking to, and she left, and I was infuriated. I was mad. And, how could this be happening? And all the emotions you go through. And she probably did the best possible thing just to call it like it is and to give that diagnosis at an early age. And so I'd love to hear about, if you remember the time, and you had it twice.
I had it twice. So
what were your emotions and feelings?
I mean, the first time it felt like I was in a small room to start with, but it felt like the walls just closed in on me. And I felt like the walls were squeezing me. But at the same time, because for many months I'd had this feeling that there was something and I couldn't quite put my hand on it, but at least it gave me a name. And having the name, I can't say I felt the relief at the time. At the time I was just overwhelmed. I just felt like it was caving in, even though I was expecting it. But when it actually happened, it's as if I was not expecting it. But really, it was just having a name, having something to that feeling that I had.
Right. Listening to Life Unrehearsed, Matt Del Vecchio here, and we're talking with Sazini Nzula about the challenges of autism. And she has 2 children, as we just talked about, 16 and 13-year-old boys, beautiful boys. Now, early diagnosis, it is very important. And why is that?
Because it gives you a framework. It gives you a framework within which to operate, within which to understand your child. Because I know that there are some parents who really try to avoid, they don't want the label. They don't want the label. But with the diagnosis, it opens up a whole world of help. And who wouldn't want help for their child, really? Every parent wants to help their child. And it starts with having a diagnosis. Then it just gives you some kind of guidance into, okay, what are we dealing with? You understand your child better. And for sure, every parent wants that. And it's essential, especially for school, because then you get all sorts of help in the classroom, which your child can't get if you don't have diagnosis.
Yeah, it's so true. And also with early diagnosis, more access to resources quicker.
Yes.
And just giving your children a better chance to succeed. Now, we always relate autism to children, young and children.
Yes.
However, guess what? The kids grow up. Yours are 16 and 13. My daughter's 25. And I always like to address the topic of, okay, they are going to grow up and they become young adults and they become adults. So as a parent, Sazini, what should they be thinking about when your kids are growing up? And you might not be able to provide them all this care in what you're doing right now when they are younger. So what should parents look for?
Honestly, I think in Canada, the last time I checked, we were the only country the only developed country, basically, which then means the only country that has the equivalent of a disability savings plan. And you can look that up anywhere. And I know when a kid is young, you think, oh, I don't have time for this. But whatever amount you have, if you open that, it's there for your child when you're no longer able to help. And the sooner you start, the better, because that's just how investing works. The other thing is to think about, okay, to write a guide to Jack or whatever, an idiot's guide to Jack, because you never know. Like for me, how to cut Ethan's hair, my older son. I cut his hair. I've always cut his hair. But if I'm not available, I would like for his haircut to be as pleasant an experience as possible. So if I wrote that down, that's me thinking about the future when I am not able to cut his hair and his life is going to be better. To start planning as early as possible, because honestly, it does come around fast.
Yeah, and you start that's a perfect example. It's just one little thing, getting a haircut. But there are dozens and dozens of day-to-day activities you could think about and jot it down. Say, okay, what if I'm not around? We need to try to prepare and have that action plan in place. And some of it's financial, just like you said, and there are government resources that could help out. Try to put whatever money you can do to put aside, because one day, hopefully they may be on their own. But you know what? One day as parents, we may not be on this earth anymore. anymore, and they're going to be totally on their own. So try to prepare for that. All right, we're talking to Dr. Sazini Nzula about trying to help out families and their loved ones in dealing with autism. And we're going to talk about, okay, if you aren't directly affected with autism, you probably know someone. So we're going to address how everyone can contribute. And a very big thing, and certainly in my world, when, at 25, you are now a young adult and you're sort of kind of pushed out of the education system and you need to integrate into society. Not very easy. However, employers are becoming a little bit more accustomed, a little bit more open to hiring young adults with special needs, and I know you're a big proponent of that, and so we're going to talk about that. My name is Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking with Sazini Nzula about the challenges of autism. Her 2 children are on the spectrum. Her son is 16 years old, and her daughter, her other son, 2 boys, is 13 years old. Sazini is the author of a wonderful book called Beautiful Inside and Out, What You Ought to Know About Autism, How to Embrace the Unique Way Your Child is Flourishing. Now, Sazini, you and I are both experiencing this. Employers are, I think, and I'm starting to see a little bit more accepting of hiring young adults with special needs. It wasn't always that way. I think we still have a long ways to go. What's your thoughts? What are you seeing out there?
I honestly find that's the most encouraging thing for me right now, because I see that even big employers, big names, EY, for example, we don't have Walgreens in Canada, but Walgreens, Walmart, a lot of the big, even hotel chains, and there are so many organizations that have come up that can help parents or people, individuals with disabilities. They run employment shows, and that gives me hope that, people are more open now, and part of it could be because of boomers resigning and they don't have a choice. Now they have to look, but it's great news for individuals with autism and other disabilities.
It really is great news. And guess what? Many of them are excellent employees as well. So shout out to all those employers that are hiring people with disabilities, and we encourage you to do even more.
And there's help. Sorry, can I just jump in for the employer? Organizations do help you, like with the hiring. How do you hire? What modifications do you have to make? You're not just being left on your own. There's help for the employer themselves, not just for the individuals with disabilities, with autism or anything. There's help for employers.
Yes, there are government programs out there that will help integrate. They'll even subsidize partial salaries, and so inquire, because it's there, and it's a win-win all around for sure. Now, speaking of resources, I do want to, you are so, just your experience, 16-year-old, 13-year-old, you have done a lot of homework. You love your children dearly, like all parents. And if you could save a little time for some families about some of the resources that you found were valuable for you.
For me, the biggest one, honestly, was WIRE, which is West Island Association for Intellectually Handicapped, and I love that organization. At the time, they were one of the few really available. But now there's other places. There are schools. There are schools like Giant Steps, like Summit School. There are, depending on where you live, there's Autism Montreal also that helps out. I don't know much about them because they directed me back to WIRE.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Summit. Both our children went to Summit. Giant Steps, fantastic. They're building a beautiful, they're almost done, and that will be a world-leading autism center. So lots of resources out there, and ask around.
And
your school.
Other parents, they are like, they are the best. They will refer because they have no interest in making, they make nothing. They will refer what they genuinely believe. It may not suit you, but you will get a lot of resources from other parents.
Yeah, love that. Talking with Sazini Nzula on Life Unrehearsed, and we're talking about autism and what we can all do to help out. Now, you wanted me to be sure we talk about self-care, because we can get so absorbed and life isn't easy at times. So can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of self-care?
It's everything. And I know that especially to the moms, because those are the ones I interact with the most. When as a mother, you want to just focus on your kids and you do everything for them. But you need to realize that at a certain point, if you're going to burn out, you can do nothing for your child. You want to do everything, but if you are not taking care of yourself, if you're not taking that time, then you can do nothing. There's resources, there's respite. You can find, just even if you bring in somebody to watch your child for you, just to have that a couple of hours a day, a week, or whatever. Take the time, because in the long run, you're not going to be able to be going because the adrenaline runs out. You can't do this long term. You have to prioritize looking after yourself.
So true. You know, as you know, I'm in the world of working with a lot of seniors and adult children, and I'm hearing you, and I'm saying the same thing to spouses of someone who may have dementia or Alzheimer's, or caregivers out there where self-care is so important, and it works exactly the same as a parent of young children and young adults as well. So you really do, it's the old analogy, right, of the airplane, the oxygen mask on yourself first. Now, I would like, besides the self-care, obviously priority, what words of advice, you know, if you were talking to a family member of someone who has autism, or even friends, neighbor, grandma, grandpa, what could you suggest to family when you want to recommend what they can do to be helpful in a situation where they've got a granddaughter or a grandson or a son or friend that has autism?
Ask the family themselves. Ask what they need. And because sometimes we think we know, we saw it on Google and we come, but it doesn't apply to them. Go and ask genuinely, okay, I understand this is overwhelming, and it would be for anything, whatever diagnosis. You want to know, what can I do to help? How can I help you the most? What would be most helpful to you right now? And go in there with no judgment, because believe me, as much as you think you're helping, you can't really ever understand. Even me with children with autism, when I meet another parent, I don't know what their individual situation is like. So I have to ask. I have to go from a position of knowing nothing. How can I help you? What do you need right now?
And I love the fact that you're mentioning no judgment. And I think as society, we are changing. You know, it was very judgmental, and it's shifting gears. And for sometimes positive reasons, and this would be an example of that, where, you know what, you don't know their situation, so ask how you can help, and I think that's excellent words of advice. All right, you know, we're already out of time. I really want to thank you, Sazini, for coming in, and I want to give a shout out to your book. Your book is excellent. It's called Beautiful Inside and Out, and a wonderful cover, by the way, and it's just great information. What you ought to know about autism, how to embrace the unique way your child is flourishing. How can people get a hold of your book?
They can find it on Amazon and on my website, drsazini.com. But first, really, I want to thank you for having me here. It's been a pleasure. We could talk for forever, I'm sure.
We could, for sure. And I appreciate you saying that. And I love having you come in studio. And I love your words of advice, because it's amazing when you talk to families and you realize that how many families are having to deal with either directly or indirectly with someone with disabilities. And so I always do appreciate you coming on, Sazini, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And really, for the early parents, there's hope. It's positive out there. It doesn't seem like it the day you get the diagnosis, but it's better than you are imagining it right now. And I see the smile on your face, and as you see the kids growing up, it's a roller coaster ride, right? But they're still growing up. They're still your kids, and all you can do is try to give them the best to flourish. Like all parents, yes. Absolutely. All right. That's Dr. Sazini Nzula, author and parent of 2 children living with autism. Thank you so much. Now, next up on Life Unrehearsed, I had a very frustrating experience from my family doctor visit at what I thought was supposed to be my annual checkup. Well, wait until you hear about my 6-minute visit. That's all I got. And it really got me thinking, many people don't even have a doctor. So I think it's over 800,000 is the number just in Quebec. And those that do have a doctor may not be happy and worried about them retiring soon. And what do I do? So I want to hear from our wonderful listeners. If you've had to go to through the process of getting a family doctor, what did you do? Or if you are waiting, we need your help. Please let us know. So after the news, we're going to take calls in from our listeners at 514-790-0800 or text us. 514-800. That's 514-800. We want to hear some solutions from you about how you went about
finding a family doctor or getting some medical advice.